All right, and we're back to the next additional element. So I guess I can rename this thing here just to, because it's not an RBD sim anymore. Elements. I hope I write it correctly. So we have two elements. Let me make it more visible. So that is the debris. All right. So let me colorize it. Maybe something like an orange. Oh, come on, something wrong with my mouse. And the next thing is our fire trails. I think oh, come on. Let's fire trails. Let's make it, I don't know, because this is fire. Okay, let's make this orange and make geometry, I don't know, maybe blue, doesn't matter. All right, so that's what we have, two additional elements. We left two. So what we need to create is the sparks and the trails, and the small trails, like a sparks trail, something like that. So in this lesson, we're going to create the sparks. I guess this one of the easiest thing at this stage, and the main reason is because for the sparks, we can use setup from the debris. So if you want to create the sparks from the explosion, I guess that we should take our explosion stage, in our case it's frame 25 and etc., and create sparks just in explosion. We don't need to generate them like fire continuously. So let's look at our debris asset. So here our cache, we packed, we removed elements using the rest, and here our explode point, we take explode point +1, so not 25 but 26, frame 26, and somewhere here, maybe even with the scatter or after the blast, because we can control the scatter separately. So let's add a null object here. Let's call it explode source. Make it orange. It's not like a final null, mainly for the final nulls I use in the black color, and I can copy this. So if I want to create, oh come on, what's wrong with this mouse? If I want to create another element, we can, drag the wire over here, but I don't like the setups like this, like wires. But, in this situation, it's more or less nice. But if we drag this thing over the old script, it's looking really not understandable as I want. So let's add the object merge. In fact, using the object merge is almost the same. And connect this to our additional elements. Explode source. So let's go to frame 26. And if it's all okay, we should see our fragments. It's take a while, but not too much, I hope. Because now we'll load geometry, the old geometry from the ship, and remove elements we don't want to use. And I guess we can use the same scatter, or we can place more points, depending on the explosion, depending on how many sparks you want to have. Mainly, the spark simulation in dynamic presentation should almost look like a debris, but I guess the main difference between debris simulation and the sparks is the resistance, the air resistance, because the sparks is much lighter. Well, like if we compare like a part of the metal part, because debris is actually the metal parts of the ship, they have a bigger weight, and they should fly away with a bigger speed because of the air resistance have less influence on this rather than it's had the big influence on the sparks. So let's set up the Explogeo. I don't know, just to make sure that we know what is this Explo source. And here we go. Here's our geometry. So now we can apply the scatter, and let's use the same the density scale. So for the density, for debris we use density 50. For sparks, let's use 50, just to look at the result. If we understand the final that we need to change something, maybe more particles, we can simply change just this scale and it will, change all other stuff. So for the debris, we did the next thing. We add the point jitter, the point velocity, and the attribute randomize, because the main thing we need to change here is velocity, because we also will create the pop network for creating the proper simulation from those points. So I guess we can copy it. Yeah, I guess we can copy all the thing, even with the pop network and even with the p-scale, I guess. We don't need our elements because I don't want to use the copy to points. I guess that we will render out our sparks like particles. We can do this. So let's move it here. All right, so with the scatter, we have those points. With the point jitter, we shift the position a little bit. So in this rotation, well, let's just add some, the random value for here, because if we have the same position for our geometry and sparks in the first few frames, they will match. So I don't want to have the same position for all those particles. So the same thing with the point velocity. In fact, I can leave this velocity as we had with the debris setup. Maybe again make an offset to make it different directions, but with the same setup, with the scale and all this guy. Alright, with the attribute randomize, again we will create the random values and multiply it. Yeah, I can leave it again. With the attribute delete, I don't know, do I have something here, but we can remove this guy. And again with the attribute randomize, and I don't need to randomize. In fact, because I don't care about normals, I don't want to apply any geometry on those points. Now with the pop network, I guess I need to dive in and change something here. And the main difference, as I said, between the debris and particles, the sparks particle, is a resistance. So let's wait till it calculate our setup here, and oh, come on. All right, so our particles is flying up. Okay, so before I do this, let's go to the burst and let's set up the interpolation, maybe forward I can use, and you can see that again calculate, and then maybe use point velocity to prevent particles moving in like layers. All right, so let's change the life expectancy. So let's say it can leave like half of a second. You need to keep in mind that those parameters in seconds, not in frames. And life variance, let's say 0.3, so 0.8, 0.2, it's like a range, the life range. All right, so with the pop drag, we have an A resistance by default 0.02. Let's increase it to 0.04, so double our A resistance, and maybe increase the resist here in the bottom area, like under the water. We can shift it and make it 0.5, let's say, lower than 0.5, or actually minus 0.5, right? Right, minus 0.5. Okay, 50, that's okay. So I don't need to have a spin anymore, again, because I didn't have a geometry. Let's remove the guide. Pop kills the same. All this guy I will leave as it is. So let's look at the presentation. Set p-scale. I guess that we definitely need to set a p-scale, and the main reason is because I want to come on, I want to have a little bit difference between the scale of our sparks. They shouldn't be the same scale. It won't be realistic. Some of those should be bigger, with a bigger glow maybe, because definitely we want to set a glow for our particles. Okay, so the p scale is 0.0321, and the so let's multiply it by 0.1, and let's leave it. I don't know what size I should want, because I should have, because really I want to I like this difference. So we have the 0.3 and 1. Let's say 0.5, maybe not such a big difference, maybe like half of a size. All right, and anyway, in the render stage, I can take this cache from my Spark system and change the p-scale multiplicator as I want. I can do this on the render stage. All right, so the next thing I want to do, let's play an animation. I want to see it dynamic. Maybe the air resistance can be the bigger than I expect. So let's begin for frame 25, and we can make a little pause to look at the result of simulation. And that's what we have. So we have a little element over there. Well, I don't know, we can simply manually remove if we have there's any fragment. We can remove it manually. I like how they're all dynamic. They should be removed pretty quickly. It's not like geometry, it should exist in all frames. With the spark, they should die very fast, and less than 1 second, a little bit less, 0.8, we have a maximum life for our particles. That, I guess, fine. Oh, come on, I remove geometry. Let me stop it. Select the pop network. I want to look at the frame where this geometry came from. So frame 47. Now let's look at geometry. We can simply remove this geo from simulation because it's just a fragment. We can remove it. Because I don't need to have a sparks in the top. There's no interaction, there's no explosion, so maybe till this frame 47, the first explosion will rise up and we won't see those sparks. But anyway, to make sure that nothing happened wrong, we can back here to our MPEG. Yeah, there is some geometry. So before I unpack this, I can go here to attribute wrangle, and then I can switch to points, select this and press delete. So this point is 78. All right. So that should work now fine. All right, so before we go ahead, let's back to our frame, let's say 27. And I want to, before I send it into the cache, I want to play with the color a little bit. So it takes some time for updating. Each time it's loading the old geometry just to remove like 80% of all geometry we have. All right, so where is our particles? Here you go. So after we set the scale, let's set the color. So after the pop network, we have an ID attribute. So what we can do, we can set random from attribute, or let's say rem from attribute, because I don't want to random, because random create like random values, and it's all colors. I don't want to use all colors. So let's select an IDs, and let's make it like an orange, maybe more in red, and the orange less saturated, something similar like this, maybe even more in red. Yeah. Okay. So to make sure that if this thing works, I mean that we randomly create our values from the ramp, because someone thinks that, okay, if we have a range from 0 to 1, this means that the ID 0 will have this color and all other IDs after the 1 will have this color. To make sure that we will apply the different colors from the ramp to each particle, let's just switch to a more simpler RGB values. So make it red, make it green. And you're right. If we have the range from 0 to 1, in this case, we will apply IDs, right, by ID. So if you select like an age, then in the beginning and make let's say 0.5. So our maximum is 0.8, but in frame 27, we don't have too much of the age, let's say 2.1, okay? Now we can see that our particles, the less life range they have or age they have, they more red color. The blue one, you don't have a blue one because they're not past the 0.1, they exist just like one frame. So if you want to apply in IDs, what we can do is select just, I don't know, like 1000. Now we can see that there is many blue colors, and definitely if we look at our particles, we have more than 1000, we have 1789. So because we use the scatter with the density scale, we're gonna have more or less particle amount per the square. And because if we create our sparks in one frame, in our case in frame 26, from the first explosion, this amount of points will be almost the same. So some particles gonna die after a few frames because the lower limit for the age we have 0.2. Right, so we can simply set here like 2000, because in the next explosion we're definitely going to have more particles. So let's go to our color and let's switch it here to 1000, and now it will apply. You can see that we have some particles with the brighter. Let's even decrease even more, make it less saturated, and here even more red to have more difference between particles. With the glowiness and all this stuff we're gonna play later on the compositing stage. For now, let's remove this color and let's set the file cache, and let's name it Sparks version 1. Okay, gonna save them. I definitely need to remove many of those attributes, because after the pop network we have a lot of unuseful attributes. So from the point attribute, all what I need to have, well, by default we're gonna have a position. Also I want to have a velocity. Definitely a color. So I'm gonna keep color, velocity. I don't know, let's keep a range, and maybe I will use this. So we need explosion frames from ID, live, I don't know, maybe even ID. That's it. So in this case, those attributes I want to keep. So I type this sign, and that means that we remove all points attributes. Set a star, it means all points attributes, except of velocity, color, age, and ID. So now we can see that we have just those attributes. Again, position by default will be will stay here anyway, because even if we type here P, it can't remove position because points can't exist without position. We can also remove our point groups because we don't need a group, especially if there's just one group. So group delete. Doesn't matter how many groups we have, just remove all of them. Okay, and let's keep the sparks. So $is $F, scene 25 frames, and add a null object to connect, to set like a final dot in this simulation. And that's going to be our sparks out. All right, so, and slowly now we can go to our last addition element, which is the trails.